It's time we all got single-minded.
Heavenly Father, we thank you for all that we've been learning so far today. Thank you for this chance to explore the topic of singleness and to see how it fits into your broader purposes for your world. And thank you for this chance now to consider the topic of contentment. And I pray that as we do, you'd help us to understand what your word says about contentment. Lord, I pray that you would help us to not just understand theoretically, but understand in our hearts how we're meant to relate to our circumstances as your people. And I pray that by your Holy Spirit, you'd be at work among us as we study your word, helping us to live the kind of lives that you want us to live, helping us to exhibit true Christian contentment. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay. The way certain words are used in Australia is very confusing to British people. You probably know in my part of Britain, if someone says, "I like your pants," they mean they can see your underwear. If they invite you for supper, they're inviting you for a meal. One of the things that I still don't understand is when you go to Coles and you finish your shopping and you go to check out, there's a section marked assisted checkouts. In Britain, we call them self-checkouts because you check out yourself. They're literally the only checkouts where you don't get any assistance, and you call them assisted checkouts. Words are very confusing. They're used in different ways. And as I started preparing this talk, I realized contentment is another one of those words. It's confusing. It means different things to different people. And I found myself asking, what does it mean to be content? And should Christians always be content? And I think probably the answer to that second question depends on your answer to the first question. Looked in a few dictionaries, they all defined contentment as happiness or satisfaction. But I reckon the way we normally use the word, it's not quite as positive as happiness, I think. If I say I'm contented, I reckon in normal usage, I'm not necessarily saying I'm happy with my circumstances, but I think I am saying that in some sense, I'm okay with my circumstances. If I'm contented, in some sense, I'm accepting my circumstances. But if that's what contentment is, then in what sense are Christians supposed to be content? Should we always be okay with our circumstances? Is it ever okay not to be okay with your circumstances? What does it mean to be content when you've just lost a child or a parent? What does it mean to be content when you're struggling with a chronic illness or a difficult conflict? Is it okay not to be okay in those situations? Does contentment mean something like this cartoon? It's fine. Whatever's going on in my life doesn't trouble me. I'm not fazed by all the ups and downs. I think sometimes that's the view of contentment that we can think we're meant to have as Christians. It's this kind of Zen-like indifference to all the ups and downs of life. Now, it might be a caricature, but I think something like that is a common view of Christian contentment. So if there's a spectrum from discontented to contented, as on this slide, then the contented person on this view is the person who's happy and satisfied with their life. The person who's finding life okay just now. Whereas at the other end of the spectrum, the discontented person is unhappy and finding life hard. And if that's your view, then the goal for Christians is to become more contented. So this guy is moving towards the contented end of the spectrum. He didn't start out very contented. I think that's because he's got no facial features. That's a bit spooky, isn't it? I'd probably be a bit discontented if I didn't have a face. But he's moving along towards the contented end of the spectrum. And that means that when it comes to singleness, if this is our understanding of contentment, then we think the contented person is the person who's happy being single, who's not bothered whether or not they meet somebody, who's not struggling especially with loneliness or desire. Sam mentioned the idea of a special gift of singleness that enables you to be completely free from any distractions about relationships. We might think that that's what contentment means. I really don't mind if I get married or not. It just doesn't even enter my mind to think about the issue. But if that's your view and that's not you, you're not the person who has that special empowering to not be distracted by thoughts of loneliness or desires, then you might think singleness isn't for you. You might think, I find it hard, it can't be for me because I'm not content. Or you might feel guilty that you're not more contented. Or you might feel disappointed with God that he hasn't given you that special gift. And what I want to argue in this talk is that, as I understand it, is not the Christian virtue of contentment. Christian contentment is not about how easy or how hard you find life. Contentment in singleness is not about how easy or how hard you find singleness. I want to suggest a different view. This is not actually the contentment spectrum. Contentment belongs on another axis. And whether you're finding life easy or hard, I want to suggest that Christian contentment is about turning to God in trust and obedience, however easy or hard we're finding life, rather than turning away from God in distrust and disobedience. So our goal then is not to become happier, but to grow in trust and obedience, to move upwards on the scale. Now, I'm still thinking all this through. I realized as I was preparing this talk that I hadn't done a great deal of thinking on contentment. I feel like maybe at ladies' conferences you have talks on contentment quite frequently, not so much at men's conferences. So I'm quite new in my thinking on this, but I spoke with Jane Tour, who, by the way, is very sorry that she can't be here today. She was going to be joining in this session with me, but she had some family issues come up. But I've been very helped by talking this material through with her, and she thought this was sensible. In fact, it was just kind of old hat to her, I think. So what's new for me maybe isn't so new for some of you, but I'd be interested to know your thoughts in the question time. Actually, I think the person who finds life really hard, and maybe there are some of you here today who just right now are finding life really hard. The person who's finding life really hard but is turning to God in trust, bringing that dissatisfaction with life to God in prayer, who's seeking to obey God even though it's hard, I think that person is a better model of Christian contentment than the person who's just not struggling at all. It's just not an issue for them. So I want to start, this is how the talk's going to pan out. I want to start by showing that grief and pain is normal in the Christian life. Christians are not supposed to find life easy. That's not the ideal that we're aiming for. Life is hard, and the Christian life is especially hard. It's not like faith in Jesus is like an epidural that just protects you from the pain of living in a fallen world. Life as a Christian is extra hard. But if Christians don't find life easy, if life is hard, what does Christian contentment look like? So that would be the second part of the talk. In other words, what does the Bible say should be our attitude to our circumstances? I think in some ways it's easier to describe than to define. And so I want to look at some characteristics of Christian contentment as I see it. Some words are hard to define. I came across a definition of a horse once that said an animal of the species horse. But you kind of have this idea of what a horse is. I think it's like that with contentment. I hope as we see what the Bible says about our attitude to life, we'll say, yeah, okay, that's Christian contentment. And then I'm going to suggest some keys to pursuing Christian contentment. And then after we've done that, Kylie's going to talk specifically about the issue of childlessness and how that relates to contentment as well. And then we'll have some time for questions, as Mike mentioned. So first, the shape of the Christian life is temporary suffering, then eternal glory. This is really, really important to get. The shape of the Christian life is temporary suffering, then eternal glory. I'm not an amazing cook, but I can follow instructions most of the time. So I like cookbooks. The kind of cookbooks I like the most are the kind that really hold your hand and say things like, I think Delia Smith does this particularly well. When you add the eggs, the whole mixture will turn into a gooey mess, but don't panic. Just keep stirring and it will all be okay. Without that warning, you might think it's all gone horribly wrong and just throw everything away. The Bible's a bit like that. It tells us what to expect so we're not taken by surprise. In fact, Peter says exactly that. In 1 Peter 4, verse 12, he says, "Dear friends, do not be surprised at the fiery ordeal that has come on you to test you, as though something strange were happening to you." So he's writing to some guys who are experiencing some suffering, some persecution, and he says, this is normal. Don't think something's going wrong. This is normal. He says at the end of the letter, this is the true grace of God. Stand firm in it. The true grace of God, suffering now, glory later. Suffering for a little while, eternal glory in the world to come. That's the pattern for the Christian life. And the Bible tells us that over and over again. You can't understand the Christian life without understanding this. Temporary suffering, eternal glory. Now, I printed Romans 8 on the handout. You can read it later. I'm not going to read that whole passage now, but I just want to highlight a couple of reasons why suffering is normal from this passage and one other. First, we live in a broken world. We live in a broken world. I've got a little graphic, hopefully come up on the screen. God made the world. And when he saw all that it had made, it was very good. But Adam and Eve sinned, you know the story, and sin and death entered the world, and creation was subjected to frustration and bondage to decay. And we see this in our world, don't we? We see a good world. We live in a beautiful part of the world. But when we turn on the news, we see the decay, the frustration, the death. On Tuesday night in Ireland, a woman died when her caravan was lifted up in a storm and blown off the edge of a cliff. Wind out of control. That's not meant to happen. But the world has been subjected to frustration and decay. The world is broken. In the USA, Hurricane Florence has claimed at least 42 lives. We live in a broken world, and so suffering is normal. Suffering is part and parcel of the world we live in. Creation is out of kilter with its creator. But there's also grief and pain because we're living in this period of history called the last days. We're living in the time between Jesus' first coming and his returning glory. So here's another diagram for you. Jesus has come, and the Bible says he will return in glory. And the Spirit is what characterizes the world to come, what energizes it, contrasted with the flesh, this world in all of its weakness and transience. And Scripture says that Christians have already been made alive by the Spirit. Paul says we have the first fruits of the Spirit. We're already citizens of that world to come. We've been given a deposit to say that we're going to share in that new creation. Paul says if anyone is in Christ, he's a new creation. But we still live in the flesh. So we're in this overlap of the ages. And Paul says we ourselves, who have the first fruits, the first installment of the Spirit, groan inwardly as we wait eagerly for our adoption to sonship, the redemption of our bodies. We're living in a world that is not our permanent home. We're already part of the world to come, but we're living in the old world. And so this world is not our true home. Because we belong to the world to come, because we don't belong to this world, there may be the additional suffering for Christians of persecution. Jesus said to his disciples, you don't belong to the world, but I've chosen you out of the world. That's why the world hates you. And then there's the fact that as citizens of the world to come, we're called to swim against the tide. We're called to live lives of costly sacrifice and radical self-denial. Paul says in Galatians that the flesh and the spirit are in conflict. That's why you don't do what you want. because the Spirit within us wants us to do what's right, to obey God, but we still live in the flesh. We still have sinful natures that belong to the old world. And so there's a conflict. So life as a Christian is hard. There's suffering now, but glory in the world to come. And that shouldn't surprise us, because that's also the path that our Savior trod. Isaiah calls him a man of sorrows, acquainted with pain. The Christian life is cross-shaped. It involves suffering and sacrifice. Now, I think we know this, but the reason I'm perhaps laboring it is I think in our culture we struggle to get this in a way that Christians in other generations, and even now in other parts of the world, got it and get it. When things aren't going well, we tend to think something's going wrong. Life generally is pretty good in our part of the world. No one's trying to kill us because we belong to Jesus. But for Christians in other parts of the world, that's not always been the case. We live in a reasonably affluent society. Some of us may be struggling more than others, but in global terms, we're actually pretty well off. So it's easy to think that suffering isn't normal in our world, and when it happens, it can take us by surprise. But if we don't get this, that there's suffering now for a while and then eternal glory, if we don't get this, two things will happen. Number one, when suffering does come our way, we'll just be knocked for six. We won't understand. We'll think maybe God's abandoned us or something's going wrong. And number two, we'll shy away from the kind of decisions that will make life harder for us. If we're finding life hard, it's not a sign there's something wrong with us. We might be finding singleness hard right now. There might be something else in life that we're finding hard. We all have different trials. We all respond differently to our trials. We have different temperaments. Some of us find some things really hard that others of us don't find hard, and vice versa. But we all have different struggles. A godly guy I know who's been public about his same-sex attraction and who expects to stay single because of it, shared that one of the things that most helped him as he was coming to terms with those facts was that his parents brought him up with a worldview that suffering was part and parcel of the Christian life, and something that God uses to make us more and more like Jesus. We need that perspective so that when tough times come, we won't be completely knocked for six. It's okay to find life hard. Contentment doesn't mean pretending like everything's going okay, or feeling like if we're grieving something that's happening in our lives that we're being ungodly or something's wrong. It's okay to grieve. The Psalms are full of lament, crying out to God because circumstances are not what the psalmist would like. And that's okay. They're great model prayers for us to pray when things are hard. Don't be surprised if you find life hard. And don't be surprised if you find life hard as a single person. Not everyone finds singleness hard, but some do. Now, I agree 100% with what Sam said earlier, that singleness is good. And singleness can free you from a lot of the troubles of marriage. As single people, we embody the resurrection in a way that married people don't. We're living testimony to the fact that marriage is not ultimate. It's very countercultural. Marriage belongs to this world, not to the world to come. But that very fact that marriage belongs to this world, that means we shouldn't be surprised if being single makes us feel less at home in this world. It's a shame it sometimes makes us feel less at home in the church. It shouldn't. Sometimes it does. Singleness is good, but it doesn't mean it's easy. I wonder if you know that ache you get in your heart sometimes when you come home to an empty house and you'd love there to be somebody there to share your day with. Or when you look back on a relationship that might have been. Or when you remember a partner who's passed on. To experience that kind of grief and pain, that is normal. It's not bad, it's okay to grieve. Contentment in singleness doesn't mean that we're free from those kind of aches. So if you're struggling with singleness, don't think something is going wrong. Don't think you need to get married, or don't think if that's not an option for you at the moment that God has abandoned you. It's just part and parcel of living in a world which is not our true home. Suffering is normal. And by the way, singleness can be hard even if it's a conscious choice. I think that's important to say. To be a eunuch for the sake of the kingdom, as Jesus puts it in Matthew 19, does not mean to be a eunuch because you feel particularly suited to that kind of life. It's a sacrifice in some ways. In other ways, it's a real blessing, but in some ways, it's a sacrifice. You're giving something up if you make that choice. It's costly. And so it's okay to find it hard. But suffering is temporary. So in Romans 8:18, Paul says, I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us. Same thing in 2 Corinthians 4:17. Our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. Light and momentary troubles. Now you might think, well, yeah, but my troubles aren't light and momentary. Paul tells us later in the letter what his light and momentary troubles consisted of. 2 Corinthians 11:23. He says, I worked much harder. I've been in prison more frequently. He's contrasting himself with some so-called super apostles who were in the Corinthian church. He says, I've been flogged more severely. I've been exposed to death again and again. 5 times I received from the Jews the 40 lashes minus 1. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was pelted with stones. 3 times I was shipwrecked. I spent a night and a day in the open sea. I've been constantly on the move. I've been in danger from rivers, in danger from bandits, in danger from my fellow Jews, in danger from Gentiles, in danger in the city, in danger in the country, in danger at sea, in danger from false believers. I've labored and toiled. I've often gone without sleep. I've known hunger and thirst, and I've often gone without food. I've been cold and naked. Besides everything else, I face daily the pressure of my concern for all the churches. Light and momentary troubles. But you see, they're light and momentary in the light of eternity. I don't think Paul was oblivious to the pain of those beatings, the hunger. Don't think that he was never fearful when he was in danger. But the eternal perspective put it in perspective. Temporary suffering, eternal glory. If you work in an office, you might get emails from occupational health and safety saying things like, if you're sitting and you're looking at your screen for too long, you need to look away from your screen and look at something in the distance. Because if you don't do that, if you don't look away from your screen and rest your eyes on something further away, you're going to become short-sighted. And it can be like that spiritually. Sometimes our circumstances, especially when things are hard, can be so all-consuming that we can lose sight of the big picture. And so just like when you're sitting at your desk, we need to look away and look at the bigger picture of the world to come that God has in store for us. We don't want to be spiritually short-sighted. Lastly, on this point, God's grace is sufficient for our troubles. Paul writes in 2 Corinthians 12, therefore, in order to keep me from becoming conceited, he's referring to a spiritual experience he had, and in order to keep him from becoming conceited because of that experience, I was given a thorn in my flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me, but he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. By the way, I'm sorry the reference on the handout is wrong. It should be verses 7 to 9 there. Notice it's okay to plead with the Lord for a change in your circumstances. If there's something in your life that you're finding really, really hard, it's okay to bring that to the Lord. Paul does that 3 times. This must have been a very intense struggle that he had. A painful thorn, but notice that rather than take it away, God says his grace is sufficient. He's going to give Paul the power to live with this weakness, with this struggle. And sometimes that's God's answer to you and me. When we're finding something in our life so hard, and we say to God, please would you take this thing away? Please would you change my circumstances? Sometimes God's answer is, my grace is sufficient. We can display God's power as we continue to live for him by his strength in that hard situation. But if suffering is normal, if Christian contentment doesn't mean being satisfied and at ease in the world, what does it look like? And I want very briefly, I'm going to skip over this next section reasonably quickly, but I want to just note some things that the Bible says should characterize our attitude to our circumstances. Hope for the world to come. We've talked about the world to come, eternal glory. Like Paul, we should consider our present sufferings in the light of that perspective. I don't think it takes away the pain, but it makes it that little bit more bearable. Christians long for the world to come. They're described that way a number of times. In Revelation, the saints cry, our Lord, come. Jesus told us to pray, your kingdom come. We're to long for that time to come when God brings in the eternal glory. Trust in God's promises and purposes. Contented Christian can be bewildered by their circumstances. You might wonder, why is God allowing me to go through this difficult situation? But they'll know that God is a good, loving Father who's working for their good, even when that's impossible to see except with the eyes of faith. A friend of mine said to me years ago, if God doesn't give me a husband, that means he doesn't love me. Now that statement, I think, came out of a lot of pain. But what are we saying if we say that? If God doesn't give me a husband or a wife, it means he doesn't love me. Is that really the only possible reason? Are we saying that we know better than God what reasons he might or might not have for doing something? And what about the cross? How can we say God doesn't love me when he gave his own son to die, when I deserve nothing but judgment from him? We need to trust God's power, his love, his wisdom, his fatherly goodness and care. That's important in our attitude to money. Hebrews 13:5 says, keep your lives free from the love of money and be content with what you have, because God has said, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. Have you ever wondered what the connection is between the command and the reason the writer gives? One of the things that can make us less than content financially, and this is an area that singles can struggle with especially, one of the areas that can make us feel less content is that feeling of insecurity. We want to get on the housing ladder because if we don't, we're worried we might not be able to afford to keep renting when we retire and so on. But God says he'll never leave us or forsake us. So however hard it might be as we struggle to save, God will look out for us. We might not live in as much luxury as we'd like. But remember, we're only passing through this life to this amazing future that God has in store. And whether we're traveling first class or economy class, we'll get to the same place in the end. Contentment involves submission to God's fatherly discipline. No discipline seems pleasant at the time. Hebrews 12:11, sorry, it's the wrong reference again. No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. But it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who've been trained by it. When things are hard, trust that God is doing something in your life, even if you can't see what it is. Sometimes it's impossible to see, but we can trust him. Rejoicing in suffering. This is the paradox of the Christian life. Paul says that he is sorrowful yet always rejoicing. The two go together. The joy comes from knowing that our future is secure, from knowing that our present is in the hands of a good God. And so we can rejoice in all circumstances. I think that's another mark of Christian contentment. Thankfulness in all circumstances, likewise. Give thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus. And obedience. What do you do when things don't go the way that you want? When you don't get your way at work or at home in a particular relationship, what do you do? Do we blame and control and manipulate and bully? Or do we accept the situation, trusting God? If we don't have something we want, do we steal it or do we trust God? Do we obey him? When Adam and Eve disobeyed in the garden, there was something that the serpent persuaded them they wanted, that God was denying them. They distrusted him and they disobeyed him. And so I think part of contentment for those of us who are single is responding to that singleness by trusting in God and obeying him, not with disobedience. I think particular struggles for singles can be inappropriate relationships. As Sam said, if you're feeling that hunger of wanting to be in a relationship, and somebody asks you out who's maybe already married or they're not a Christian, it can be very tempting to say, oh yeah, I'm going to go along with that. But the contented person won't do that. Contented person won't turn to pornography or fantasies in their mind as a way of satisfying that feeling that they're desiring. They'll trust God and they'll obey him. And the contented person will serve God and others. They'll be getting on with living their life in the present for Jesus and for other people. If I were to ask you why Jesus died, I wonder what you would say. Probably most of you have an answer to that question. Why did Jesus die? But here's an answer you don't often hear from Paul in 2 Corinthians 5. Christ's love compels us because we're convinced that one died for all and therefore all died. Why did he die though? He died for all, that those who live should no longer live for themselves, but for him who died for them and was raised again. Did you know that's why Jesus died for you? He died for you so you could live for him. So are you living for him? And are you looking not to your own interests, but to the interests of others, as Paul says in Philippians? I think one of the problems with some of our talk about contentment is it can be very me-focused. It's all about me getting to the position where I'm happier or more fulfilled in life. But actually, as we read Paul's life or the life of Jesus, they're very other person-centered. And I think that's another mark of contentment. I'm pretty much out of time, but I'm just going to take a few minutes to deal with the last section. Cultivating Christian contentment. If that's what contentment is, if these are the characteristics of contentment, how do we cultivate it? Well, we need to guard our heart. Proverbs 4:23 says, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. How do you guard your heart? Well, like with physical health, you have to watch what you consume. So last year, my doctor told me to cut down on red meat and fatty foods. I have to watch what I consume for the sake of my heart. What ideas are you consuming and where are they coming from? A lot of our discontentment, I think, actually comes from the things that we're consuming. Whether it's Facebook with all those great holiday photos and baby photos and food photos and stuff like that, it can make you think, well, the real life is the life with all those goodies. And my life just doesn't really match up. Don't compare yourself to other people, except for to Jesus. What does the TV you watch tell you about life? What does it tell you about sex and marriage and relationships? And perhaps you need to go back to the Bible to challenge some of those lies, some of that fake news about life. I'd encourage you, if you're finding singleness hard right now, to try and put your finger on the reason, to ask, is it loneliness that you're finding hard? Is it your sense of identity? Is it financial security? And then ask yourself how Scripture speaks to that issue. So I sometimes struggle because I believe the lie that my sense of identity comes from a spouse and children. Sadly, our churches can perpetuate that lie. Why is it whenever we get a visiting speaker, the first question we ask them is, tell me about your family? Not always, but often. Are we saying that's the most important thing about them? What's the first thing people often say about themselves? I'm married to X and I have this many children. I wonder how Jesus would answer that question. Tell me about your family. Probably the way that he did answer when people said, your mother and your brothers are looking for you. Whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother. When it comes to sexual temptation, do we believe the lie that we can't fight it? Or do we believe Scripture that God has given us everything we need for life and godliness? But lastly, we can help one another. Let's be a good example to one another. Married people could be a good example to us singles that marriage is not the be-all and end-all of life. Let's love one another well. Let's not be quick to say to one another, just be content. Let's hear one another out. Let's bear one another's burdens. But also be ready to speak the truth to one another. And let's look out for one another's practical needs. I think one of the areas that we can really work on as single people and married people together is how we think about sharing real needs in our lives. Sometimes we can be afraid as single people to share things that we need. But we need to be willing to make ourselves vulnerable in that kind of way and also to support other people so that we love them.
You guys hear me? Oh, I can hear myself. Awesome. So, yeah, hopefully that was encouraging to a lot of you. Just for a show of hands, how many people here have ever been single? Oh, yeah. So it's definitely a topic that touches everyone. So with that, I would love to invite our panelists up for the discussion. So I'd love to invite Pastor Craig, Auntie Jenny, Sandra, and Chung Hai up on stage. And also, I will also be a panelist today. So, yeah, if you do have any questions that you want someone specifically to answer, just put it in the text. Thanks, guys. Cool. Thank you guys so much for saying yes to be on the panel. I know this is a topic that we don't often talk about at church, but yeah, it does affect a lot of people. Yeah, I think personally for me, what stood out from the seminar is that it's actually okay that life is hard. It can be challenging, and we can still seek to obey God in the midst of the challenges of life. So, yeah, with that, I will just have a look at some of the questions that have come through. Cool. So before doing that, I'm going to get the panelists to introduce themselves. So I'll pass it to Sandra to start off.
Sure, I can start. My name's Sandra. Some of you I've met before, most of you I think. I've been single for quite a long time, more so because maybe people I've been interested in haven't been interested in me, or vice versa. If they're interested in me, I'm not interested in them. So I haven't yet met the person that hopefully God might have for me. And I recently turned 40, and I think during that time there was I kind of went through my 20s and 30s being, struggling in singleness at times, but generally okay. And then around my 40th birthday, my mentor said to me, how do you feel about turning 40 and being single? And I think there was a bit of grieving that happened then, thinking about, especially if I did want to have kids, not being the potential, of that happening could be lessened. So, yeah, there's been a bit of a journey in that probably over the last couple of months, I'd say. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Chong Hai. My work life, I started out as a teacher before moving to the private sector in Singapore. But since moving to Australia 18 years ago, I've been with Our Daily Bread Ministries for the past 17 years. Regarding my single life, I've never been married. It's not by choice, but on the way to church with Huidi and CK, I was just telling her that at 63, it's a bit hard for me to say that I'm still waiting for the right one. But yeah, basically, I can say that over time, by God's grace, I've become more comfortable with the status, but it wasn't by choice. Thank you.
Hey there, my name's Craig, and thanks. You actually gave me a promotion. I'm not actually a pastor here. I'm a church worker. I coordinate the music, and I'm loving that.
Yeah. Sorry, Craig.
No worries. And I also work at Interserve as a communications, as a writer, writing their newsletters and social media, and soon to be their Go magazine. I was once married, and then I got divorced. It wasn't completely by choice. It was a difficult time, and it resulted in my wife going and leaving for someone else, and then in the end agreeing to the divorce when she didn't come back. So yeah, I was involved in the marriage, and there was relationship difficulties, but that was what led to my singleness. And then I've been single for a long time since. I'm actually in a dating relationship now, but still, I haven't been married since then, and that's been about 11 or 12 years now. So that's where I'm at.
Hi everyone, my name is Jenny To. So I have been married for over 35 years and with my husband for well over 40 years. But he passed away in 2012, and it's actually the anniversary, the 10th anniversary of his passing today. So I think God has kind of wanted me to acknowledge that he has been there for us well before we were married, and he has always been sovereign in our lives, keeping us intact as a family. But when he actually passed away was when I kind of felt that his compassion and his care and his heart actually touched me a lot more during that time when he wasn't around. And my son Devin is a pastor here at CrossCulture, so that's my claim to fame. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, guys. So I'll introduce myself. So yeah, I've been. So for those, yeah, most of you, some of you may know me, Elijah. For those of you who don't know me, outside of church, I work part-time on my own business. So I work in a consulting business. We help first-time founders and creatives. And the other part-time, I work at Kathmandu. So yeah, a bit about me is that I'm single by choice. So yeah, haven't found the right person just yet. So yeah. Cool. So we'll dive a bit deeper into probably the most juicy part of tonight, which is your questions. So let's have a look at that. Yeah, just to unpack, I mean, just a disclaimer, I'm not an expert in relationships, but yeah, just to dive a bit deeper into how do you unpack being single and content. If you're single and if you're not single, how you can support those single people around you. Cool. So the first question is, could you talk about your thoughts on waiting on God versus taking initiative yourself to find someone to date? Example, Ruth in the Bible takes initiative. Yeah, cool. I'm going to pass it to Sandra. Not to put you on the spot. Or
Is it talking about whether, like, should the guy be the initiator, or is it okay for a woman to initiate?
No, I think it's just in
initiating
general, for either gender. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I think why not? Like you said, Ruth initiated. So go and find your Boaz, women. No. Yeah, I think sometimes when some of my experience has been where I've been interested in somebody and they, and you have these feelings and you're thinking about it for a long time and you just kind of build up these thoughts in your mind, or, I don't know, it just can go on for a while because maybe as a woman I've been told before that, you should wait for the man to initiate and these sorts of things. And so you're kind of waiting around and hoping that he's noticing and these sorts of things. And then I think that can be prolonged. And then maybe if the conversation ever comes up and they're not interested, and then you kind of think, I've wasted so much time thinking about this person and so much energy going into this. So maybe because I'm a little bit older now, I'm a bit more like, I can't be bothered with that. If I'm interested in somebody and I've prayed about it and, they're somebody that I could see myself serving God with and, he's a good Christian guy, whatever, then I wouldn't be afraid to maybe bring it up or ask them to go for a coffee or something like that, just because I think that's okay to do. I don't know about you guys. What do you guys think?
Craig?
Well, yeah, speaking from a guy's perspective and also just in my experience, yes, waiting on God is vital. We need God's provision and guidance, but also I need to actively and purposefully wait on God. So if I'm, for example, idle and I just never ask a girl out, I may well never go on a date in my life. Someone might ask me out, but it may well not happen. So I think having that desire to date someone, get to know someone and be married is a good desire. It's a godly desire. And we need to wait on God. But as I'm waiting on God, I think it's healthy to actively seek out that relationship. Like Sandra's saying, pray, seek God. And then in God's timing, God's provision, there is an opportunity to get to know someone and go on a date. Then that actually does require action from one or the other to say, hey, would you like to go have a coffee? Hey, would you like to go for a walk? Would you like to meet up? And so in that, it becomes a step of faith in God's provision. to take a step in that relationship.
Just a follow-up question, Craig, if you don't mind. Could you unpack a little bit about what it means to be, like, how do you wait on God during that time? Like, is it through prayer? Yeah, in this season of waiting.
Well, I mean, there's probably the right answer, and then there's what I went through. So, yeah, waiting on God. Like, in the time after I was divorced, and I had a relationship shortly after that, but after that, there was probably a space of about 5 or 6 years where I didn't go on a date. I actually didn't know anyone that I wanted to have a relationship with. I did want to have a relationship, I would say, but I think I was yearning. I was struggling. My prayers probably took the form of laments as I'm walking somewhere or as I'm home in my room. I'm like, God, I really want to be with someone. It was quite agonising. I think probably a healthy thing is what we heard in the talk just earlier of contentedness showing itself in trust and obedience to God, knowing that God has our best at heart, knowing that our life is characterised by temporary suffering with the future of eternal glory, our best that God has stored up for us. One thing I would say to add to what the speaker said just before is I don't think it's only that contentedness is shown in actively turning to God in trust and obedience, but contentedness is based on our unshakable standing with God, the right relationship that Jesus has won for us. We always have this relationship for those of us who are united in Christ. And from that flows in trust and obedience and turning to God. So I think that would have helped me to remind myself of that during those years of no dating, no romantic relationship in my life, but yearning to be with someone. Because I did know that experience of being married to someone and then it was taken away. So in those agonising prayers, I think it would have been good and helpful for me to keep reminding myself of the truth of that relationship with Jesus that can never be taken away, and knowing the future, the best he has stored for me and for you.
Yeah, for myself, I would say it's definitely attention, because as a guy, you're generally the person who takes action, puts yourself out there. But yeah, just a thought between waiting on God and taking initiative. So yeah, like for me, I came out of a really long-term relationship, which was like 4 or 5 years. We had been dating, seeing each other. We're quite serious. And then all of a sudden it ended. So probably the wise thing for me was, the decision I made was not to get into another relationship immediately, because I haven't fully moved on. That's not the wisest thing to do. So I think, so just for me it was just wrestling with God, to myself as well, to process that, to give myself enough time to move on, and then before pursuing another relationship. But yeah, if you're a guy out there, definitely take action. I would say as a man, it is a thing that we're called to do, which is to take risks, and not reckless risks, but definitely, for example, if the girl is, for example, a Christian, that's always helpful. No, but seriously, definitely, it's, I think I've definitely seen relationships that are non-Christian, and I'm not going to say that you can't date a non-Christian, but I would say that the chances of it working out is really, really low. So you may as well get a lottery ticket. And yeah, so it's about the same. But yeah, moving on to the next question. I think we'll move on. Moving on to the next question, which is how has walking closely with God through your singleness encouraged you during times of loneliness? So yeah, whoever wants to pick that up.
Sorry, can I have a question?
Yeah,
again?
yeah. So the question is, how has walking closely with God through your singleness encouraged you during times of loneliness?
All right. So, I mean, my case would be different because I am widowed and I actually lost my husband. So, the void in your heart can never actually be replaced by something else that wouldn't fit exactly into what you have lost. So it's no point seeking some sort of physicality type of replacement for that void. So for me, the fact that, I mean, God or Jesus loves us individually and he values us just as much as any other couple for us to be individuals. So our joy would be in seeking Jesus and seeking his presence and walking and with him directing our steps. So for me that is sufficient, and and I think for me that is contentment in my life at the moment.
Yeah.
Does that answer your
Yeah,
question?
that answers the question very well. Anyone else?
Well, I think as a single for the past 63 years, I got a fair bit of practice. I'm single and I'm also here alone in Melbourne. My family is back in Singapore. I think one of the things that has helped me before coming to talk about my relationship with God is the fact that I found having good relationship with people, building healthy relationship with people has been very helpful, especially good Christian relationship. And one of the things that I recognize over time is that sometimes this craving for a soulmate or whatever is actually a cry for intimacy. And I realized that sometimes when you have healthy relationship, you actually can find that intimacy, maybe not the sexual kind, but there are a lot of other kind of intimacy in that relationship. And just drawing from that, I do find that, especially over the pandemic where we work from home and all, and so you actually have more time to spend time with the Lord. You know, when you're working, going to work, you kind of like wake up, 10 minutes, quiet time, and then rush off to work. But over time, working from home over the past 2.5 years, I found that I had more intentional time with the Lord. And I found that having that time and beginning to discover the fact that it is not just a quiet time, but an encounter with the Lord. And through that process of getting to know Him, I actually found it a lot easier, because then, you know, finding somebody to talk to, I basically talk to the Lord and I talk to Him about my struggles and all. And because He's no longer just somebody that I pray because I have to pray as a Christian, but because He has become somebody that has become more personal, I do realize that it's an outlet. And in some sense, even if I have somebody, a soulmate, a human soulmate, I don't think I can talk about everything that I talk to the Lord. And that actually helps. Thanks.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks. So another question we had was, how can the church better love and support you as a single person? Cool. I'll pick that up. I'll pick that up. Cool. So, Yeah, it's an interesting question because haven't really thought much about it. Because typically, yeah, I think, but one way the church can do that is through community. I think, as Chung Hai was saying, the importance of relationships, and part of the reason romantic relationships are put on a pedestal is because of the intimacy or the value we perceive we're gonna get from that. To be known, to be loved, to be heard, and so I think, just being including single people. Like if you know someone who's single, perhaps they're new to the church, include them in events, include them in your personal life, not just, in the corporate setting. Just really showing them what, I guess, being a Christian is about: being generous with your time, being generous with what you do, things like that. Yeah. Sandra, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think being at a church like CrossCulture, I think we're really blessed that there are a lot of single people in the church. I know that some friends of mine who go to other churches that, there's a lot of families or young marrieds, especially at my age. So they've really struggled because they have found it hard to connect with other single people because they just don't really have them in their church. So I think CrossCulture is really, I think I haven't felt very single at CrossCulture. I think because there are a lot of single people, and that's been a real blessing. I think something that we do, I appreciate that we don't, I don't feel that at this church we hold marriage up so highly where, I can kind of talk about what I've heard other places do and say, like celebrating people getting married or having babies or these sorts of things, which we do, but I think we're also very aware of celebrating other stages of life too, like maybe some sort of like a work promotion or, something else that isn't related to your relationship status. I think that's really important to kind of make sure that all of our celebrations aren't around what your relationship status is. I think also, having spaces for community and where you can connect with people who are married and single, I think is really great that we have that here. I think also, just being, I think we're quite mindful that there are a lot of single people at this church, so I don't feel like we really single people out, or that's been my feeling anyway, as a single person at the church for a long time. I don't feel like that. If you do, then please talk to me about how we can do things better, because, always wanting to make sure that everyone feels included.
Yeah, Craig?
Yeah, similar to what has already been said. I would say let's invite single people along to things. I would say that when I've been single, I would tend to be invited or do things with other single people. When I've been in a relationship, I would be invited on way more double date type things or things with other people who are in relationships. So I would just encourage us not to forget single people when we're inviting people on social things, because whether we're married in a relationship or single, everyone needs edifying friendships. Everyone needs good relationships, no matter what the stage of life we're in. So that would be really encouraging to single people and at all stages of life, really. The other one is, instead of putting marriage up on the pedestal as the ultimate experience in this life, let's put union with Christ up on the pedestal as our ultimate intimacy, our ultimate reality, and the glorious future that we all have to look forward to when we're united with Christ in that final union. it's interesting that Paul actually advocates for singleness. He wishes more people were single to have that freedom of serving Christ. One time I've heard older ladies actually come up and talk during their time to talk about their experiences as missionaries and how they've served God. And I remember one lady says, she goes, "I know the urge is very strong to desire to be married." But she just loved her freedom. She loved her freedom to serve God, to go out with friends, to be involved in the things that God has laid out for her. So both are different training grounds to becoming like Christ and to look forward to our most intimate union with Christ, which we can enjoy now in this life.
Yeah.
Actually, I got quite a lot of things to say.
Go for it.
But before I do, I actually benefited from Chris Thompson's talk, and I think one of his points was that life is hard. And I recognize that it's a timely reminder that life is hard not just for singles, for married people. So that helps me because sometimes there's an expectation like, oh, I'm single, look at me, I need attention. But the fact is that I have enough good married friends who are vulnerable enough and also trust me enough to share of their struggles, particularly with married life. So I think we all have our own stories, whether you're single or married. So in some sense, that helps to manage my expectation of married people. Having said that, now here are my complaints. Sometimes I wish married people don't feel so uncomfortable when they realize I'm single, because I actually have married people or people who are married, when they discover that I'm single, actually apologize to me. I'm not sure why, but they apologize, and that makes me pretty awkward. So I'm not uncomfortable because of my singleness, but I'm comfortable because they are uncomfortable. The other thing that I noticed that my well-meaning married couples, friends try to do is this: they will advise me, don't go and go for holiday with a single lady who are not married and all. You can get into all sorts of temptations. And while I appreciate that advice, sometimes I do out of just to provoke the conversation, I do ask them, but if you ask me not to have holidays with other single people, how come you don't invite me out when your family has an outing or your family has a holiday? Why don't you just call me along? And I think in some sense, I suppose the principle of if you are asking a single not to do something, perhaps you can offer them a positive option, because I think that would help. Because it's easy enough to say, don't do this, don't do that, don't this, don't do that. But then what else do you want them to do, So maybe that's something, if you as a married couple wants to guide a single person along and kind of try to help him by not doing certain things, then offer a positive option. That's one thought. The other one would be, I talk about friendship and all. So I suppose, again, as married people, I think you have a lot of, and especially over the pandemic, I know that there's so much things to worry about, children going to school, getting pandemic and all. And so I understand that married people have their own struggle. But I think it is easy to get caught up with your own family troubles that sometimes we do not take the time to reach out to a single. And so I suppose being conscious of that, public holidays like Huidi, it's very kind to invite me for her Christmas parties and all when the pandemic wasn't around. So those little things like that is very helpful, because sometimes Christmas, New Year Eve, when you're sitting at home drinking beer alone and looking at the TV, it can be a bit depressing. But to know that somebody remembers you on such occasions, and to be able to say, hey, why don't you come along? We're having a little celebration. I think that will be very helpful and encouraging. Thanks.
I just thought of something else based on what you're saying, which is great. I think sometimes people assume that because a group of single people are doing something, then they're happy for any single person to join them. And I think sometimes that I found that a bit difficult because, you wouldn't just invite yourself along to a family's holiday. So then single people, sometimes they just, invite themselves, or people say, oh, there's those other single people, you can go and hang out with them, which is good. Like, we want to be welcoming, but I think sometimes, maybe this is just me being selfish, but I'd like, sometimes I have things that I'd like to do with just a few friends. And then when other people, kind of invite someone else along because they're also single, then I think, oh, it's a little bit tricky. I'd love to hang out with you, but maybe at a different time. So I think just being aware also that even as a single person, sometimes we have people that are kind of like family, or instead of doing things, does that make sense? Yeah, there are times when you want to do things with just your close friends because they're kind of your family replacement. So then, just not always thinking, oh, they're single people, they can also just all hang out together all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think just adding to that, I think just the idea of like normalizing the fact that people are single in the church, or even in families. I think, I can speak for myself. I think there was this period in life where my family were like, how's your grades, how's uni, etc. And then for the longest time, and then after I hit a certain age, they're like, oh, how's your relationships? And they were so it just changed, who you're seeing. So I think just having that understanding that, it's probably not a good idea to keep pushing the question every time you see them, or yeah. So I think in Asian some Asian cultures it happens a lot. Maybe it's family gatherings or other occasions, and as a church, I think we often focus on families. So I think it'll be good to normalize that, everyone is on their own journey, and when's the right time to be in a relationship? It's when you're ready for it. When's the right time to get married? When it's the right time to get married. So, yeah. So that's what I would say. Cool. So another question here was, sometimes I feel so much disappointment, not necessarily just from the topic of singleness, but in general, from other things. I feel angry at God. What can I do?
I think a lot of times we have to realize that God has a plan for us, and that we have to submit to His authority. So, and if you sometimes, just being single, and we happy to be single a lot of the time. But of course, there are times when we do get a bit down, where you kind of think, it'd be nice to have someone to kind of watch your back, and just to have a conversation with, and just to ask them little things that you would ask your partner, just to check if you were making the right decision, or if you were doing whatever, whether it is the right way to go about things. But I think we will always have to sort of, when times like that hit us, I think we have to look around and see how God has blessed us in so many other ways, just to give thanks for everything that we are, and however we are, just to give thanks for His blessing in our lives. And if we do that, for me anyway, I kind of feel that He is caring for me as much as anyone else. So there's no need to sort of get into that depressive kind of feeling where you feel like you hard done by, or yeah.
I think something that Chris said on the video was to practice thankfulness and to think every day of something that we can thank God for. So I think, taking our eyes sometimes off what we're feeling disappointed about and look at, like Auntie Jenny just said, things that we can be thankful for, the ways that God has blessed us. I think that's a good practice and something that can help us to see God's goodness in our lives.
Yeah, go for it.
I think it's all right to be angry with God, and sometimes it happens. I know that I have. But I think it's a learning process, and it's very much getting to know a person better. And I think because I'm much older and I've gone through a longer time in my Christian life, one of the things that's very important for me is that I've begun to at least appreciate in a deeper way that God is not only good, God is wise. And that has helped me very much, because when I don't understand things, the very fact that I fall back on the character of God, that He's good and that He's wise. And there's a song that says, He's too good to be unkind. He is too wise to be mistaken. And that sense of who God is has kind of helped me when I don't understand things. And I suppose when I'm angry, hopefully I don't get angry for too long. But the fact is that there are struggles. I do not deny that. I remember talking to my half-sis in Singapore over Zoom one day, and she basically said, "Are you depressed?" And I realized I was depressed without knowing it. And so it was good to be able to talk and articulate and to get support and encouragement. But ultimately, for me, it's really knowing the God that we believe in and to understand that reality that He is good, He is wise, and He is powerful enough to do things, not just those. So for me, that has been a great help. Thanks.
Thanks, Chung Hai. For me, I would say, sorry. Yeah, okay, I'll go. So for me, I was just gonna say that, in terms of being angry with God, I think it's more of a heart thing. And I was, similar to the series we've just gone through on conflict. Just acknowledging that you have emotions and it's okay to be angry. I think, in the Psalms we learn that we can express our emotions to God, and that's okay. It's better than not talking to Him. And so a lot of the times, I think for me, what I've learned is at the times where I don't feel like praying, I will just pray the Psalms, and that helps me because it helps me to express some emotions that I can't express. But yeah, it's really, it's tough. That's just something that's helped me. Craig?
One question that I would have is, do we trust that God has our very best at heart? Do we trust that our Heavenly Father has our best at heart even more than we do ourselves? I remember one thing that, this is a paraphrase of what Tim Keller said, that if we knew all the things that God knew, then we'd ask for the things that He gives us. Sometimes we're discontent and angry, and as we're saying, the Psalms show us to pour out all our frustrations and anger to God in prayer. But God has our very best at heart. He has our eternal joy in Christ at heart. And all the hard things, as well as all the good things, He gives us with a more complete knowledge of ourselves and our life than even we do of ourselves. And ultimately, all these things will work together to lead us to our joy and to lead us to our life in Christ that surpasses anything we can know in this life. But go on into that eternal glory and eternal joy in Christ that we've heard about today.
Awesome. Thanks, Craig. What would you say is the best way to support someone in conversation who is single? That is it okay to bring up the subject, or is it too insensitive?
I think it depends on your relationship with that person. So if I didn't know someone very well and I knew that they were single, and just bringing it up might be a little bit random, or assuming that maybe they're not content or they're struggling in their singleness when maybe they're not. I think with close friends, then it's something that that you can ask your close friends, and I think that is good to check in with each other and to see how each other's doing and to pray for each other. I think even asking, because some people are single and interested in meeting somebody, and so to know that about your friend is good, because then if you meet somebody that could be good with them, then you could try to set them up. But some people aren't in that space, and they don't really want to be set up, or they're single and maybe they're wanting to they're okay being single in this season. So, I think it depends on your relationship with the person. I wouldn't just go and ask any random, someone that I don't know very well, how they're doing. Unless that, if they bring it up and it kind of comes up in conversation, I might ask, how are you doing with it? And, what are some of the struggles, but what are some of the joys of it as well? Just I don't think we'd just go up and ask a married couple, how's your marriage going? That would be a little bit, unless you're close friends and you feel like that's, appropriate to do.
Yeah, thanks, Sandra. Chung Hai? Yeah, sure. So it says, what would you say is the best way to support someone in conversation who is single? Is it okay to bring up the subject, or is it too intensive?
We talk about support doesn't necessarily mean matchmaking, right?
No.
Okay. I really think that sometimes perhaps we can be too caught up with this thing about singleness. I think if somebody, I agree with Sandra, I think it depends on the relationship. But if you are interested and want to ask questions, don't ask me as a single, ask me as a person. Because, whether you are single or you're married, I think there are always challenges and all. So be interested in me not as a single, but as a person, and ask questions because of who I am, not because of my singleness. And I think that would help. And again, if your relationship with that person is good, I think that would be appreciated. Thanks.
Yeah, that was really good. Yeah, I would just echo that. And just piggybacking off that, I would say that, as a church or as a community, I think we can do that better by creating room where we can have those deeper conversations. And I think whether it's, for example, whether it's a close friend or your discipler, you, instead of asking them, how's your singleness going, you can ask them, what's been on your mind lately, right? And then from there you can see, treat them as a person, and then see where that goes. You can ask them, outside of work, outside of this, how's everything else going, right? So I think there's ways you can do it more tactfully, where you can show care. So that's what I would say. So another audience member says, what's the biggest struggles as a single person? How has God's word helped you during times of struggle?
So I'm not really familiar with the Bible verses. I do read my Bible. It's just that I can't remember the exact words or that are being quoted. But I love Psalm 91. I just find that it's so assuring for me to know that God is my refuge and God is my fortress. And I try and, actually I know that by heart, and I try and recite that actually practically every day when I have time, and I find that it really helps me. Yeah.
I think as a single person, I've struggled with loneliness, especially when I went to Nepal. I found that period quite hard, especially the last... so I was in Nepal for about 5 years, and I was there initially for 2.5 years. And during that time, I made a lot of good friends, and then I came back to Melbourne for home leave. So this is when I was a missionary, and so came back for 6 months. During that time, had time to reconnect with friends here, and then I went back to Nepal, and a lot of my friends that I'd made in that first couple of years had left, and so I was starting again with friendships, and that was really, really hard. And so it was in that next couple of years that I really struggled with loneliness. And so I think during that time, I think the passage that Chris talked about, I think it's 2 Corinthians, about Paul asking God to take away the thorn, but him saying that my grace is sufficient for you. So I prayed that, and I had to just trust in God's grace and His sufficiency. Also, just knowing that He never leaves us nor forsakes us. I think that has been really helpful in times of loneliness as well. And I think that that has been really amazing, knowing that even though I've gone to different places on my own, but knowing that I have a God who is always with me. I think that's always been really comforting because, especially when you go to a new place and you don't have any friends, and I think knowing that God is always with us and that we can always talk to Him and He's closer to us than anyone else, that's always been really helpful for me. I think that's all I have to say about that.
Can I share something?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I think realistically as a single, I do experience loneliness in certain occasions. But because I'm also an introvert, I do enjoy my own company. So sometimes I can spend a lot of time just pottering around the house and do things by myself. But I think one struggle that I have as a single is going for holidays or doing things together. So because I'm 63, right, and a lot of my friends who are around my age are feeling quite retired, but I'm actually quite active, and I do enjoy a lot of physical exercises. So I do find it hard to find people. So that's one. The other thing I mentioned earlier, going for holidays. So at one stage, I'm always waiting for people, and I realized that if I wait for them, I'll never go for a holiday. And so what I've done over the last 5 years is the fact that I've started to do things by myself, like I went to Canadian Rockies and do backpacking and cycle from one town to another town and stuff like that. My real struggle in doing all those things is because I'm an introvert, I don't mix around very easily, is fear. And so fear is one thing that kind of stops me from doing a lot of things. And so I think my relationship with God and my, over time, just knowing that everything is under His control, just the fact that nothing happens without His knowledge, just the fact that He's always with me and stuff like that has helped me to kind of venture out a bit. I think there's a book that's written, if you want to walk on water, you need to get out of the boat. And for me, it is learning to just step out in faith. Yes, I've never done backpacking before. I've never done this before. But just doing that also brings me back to God, because while I'm doing that, a bit frightened, then I have to cling on to God and look at His Word and see what His Word says regarding this situation, that situation, and it helps me to crystallize God's Word in the context of what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis, and I find that helpful. Thanks.
Okay. Probably one of the biggest struggles for me in my singleness was after being married and having that most intimate connection with someone in the marital relationship. When that was taken away, it was like this vacuum of intimacy, and it couldn't just exist in nothing. I needed to have relational connection in some way. Loneliness. But a big one for me was actually physical touch. I no longer had that loving physical touch that I experienced during my marriage. And so I went through something close to what I'd describe as like a drug withdrawal. Times of agony where I feel like I couldn't go on another hour unless I had that physical touch, and like tears and shaking and rocking. And that can lead to all sorts of temptations of how it can be expressed. But when I went to my a psychologist at the time, she said to me that I needed good friendships. Okay, I wasn't married anymore. I still had the need for relationship, the need for intimacy, and I needed to have good friendships, especially with people of the same sex. So good mates. Yes, we need to. I think it stems from that fostering a good, intimate relationship with God in devotional time in prayer. But from that relationship with God, that actually needs to express itself in tangible ways, relational ways. So fostering good friendships, good relationships, having the non-sexual but edifying friendships and relationships really supported me coming out of that time where I really struggled from the withdrawal of not having that physical touch. So that helped me a lot.
Yeah, thanks. Go for it, Sam.
I was just going to add as well, I think the times when I'm most discontent in my singleness is when I'm interested in someone, because then you're like, oh, there's someone there that, and then you start feeling really single and like wanting to be in a relationship. So I think for me, during those times, I think it's okay to tell God, God would really love it if that person would be interested in me as well. But just holding that lightly and trusting and obeying God, but trusting that He knows best and that He has His best for us. And I always think about when Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane, he prayed, God, please take this cup from me, but not what I want, but what you want, trusting that the Father knew, so much. He trusted himself to God's will, and I think that's something that comes to mind for me when I'm struggling in being single and when there's somebody that I'm interested in is, okay, God, I'd really love to be in a relationship with this person, but God, not what I want, but what you want, and just trusting Him with that.
Yeah, for myself, I would just echo the same. I think singleness is something that everyone feels. Loneliness is a struggle that everyone goes through, some more than others. Like Sandra was saying, I think especially when you know that there's someone you're into, and for guys, I think it's when you're, thinking about pursuing that relationship, it can feel more difficult. Because there's the fear of rejection, or maybe you have gotten rejected, or and I think we can forget that the end goal is not marriage. Like the goal of the gospel and being a Christian is actually to have a closer relationship with God, but at the same time, I think having a more accurate view of how relationships help in that bigger picture. But in terms of loneliness, yeah, like some of the panelists have said, Cheng Hoi, I think would be building strong relationships, especially for me. What I found after I got out of this 4-year relationship, we kind of ended things not so clearly. It was difficult because that was like I had kind of pushed away a lot of my other, like I didn't invest much time or effort in my other relationships, and because of that, I actually felt more lonely. I felt more, different, and that was difficult. But as I started to build better relationships with the people around me, friends, family, I found that there's every week I have some of the boys like inviting me out. Let's go for dinner. Let's play like futsal. Let's do something, and that actually really helps. So it just goes back to intimacy, and I think the other thing is developing a love for God, like having a deeper love for God helps as well, because I think oftentimes we have competing loves. This is the way I see the things. Like, so often, if I wanna, let's say, overcome this lack or this love that I'm trying to get, I have to replace it with another thing. so that's kind of how I think about it. Um, yeah. Hope that helps. Let's see. So another question is, how did you accept your identity as a single person, especially after the death of a spouse? Or does knowing that you'll meet in heaven again, is that enough?
For me, when when my husband passed away, so it wasn't just the loss of someone, but it was like your way of life, your routine, your plans, what you hope to do in the future. And it's not just taken away over time. It's not something that you readjust to and modify, but it's almost like a complete reset or recalibration, and not over time. It's like it's overnight that you have to sort of, everything is like completely new, it's strange, you've never been down that road before. So no, it wasn't easy, but the fact that God has been there, I mean, that his compassion came through, that I knew his heart. I mean, in all the other times he had provided, but from a sovereign point of view where you sort of thank him for his provision, for his care, but this time you actually had to really dig in deep to sort of see what he had in store for you. And I think you learn a lot of empathy. So, and in that way, you can kind of feel that you are a little bit more qualified now to be able to lift others up, to be able to encourage, to be able to support others in their journey. And it's not just what we can do for them, but it's also what they actually bring into our lives that has never been apparent before, all the blessings that we've never thought that people are so generous with and so caring in their way. So it's been a two-way thing where you gain, but you also give back.
Yeah, thanks for that. So we have a question here which says, what about external factors? If we are at peace about being single, how should we deal with other people who may see our singleness as a fault? Or how about the problem of other married people sometimes offloading their jobs to us, single folks, and how do we deal with that because they think that we have no family commitments? tough question. Anyone wants to pick that up?
I am really thankful to be single in ways that I feel like I have more flexibility actually in my work and what I'm able to do. So not that I feel like people are offloading their jobs to me, but I have often thought that I am really thankful to be able to be flexible, to work, to have meetings in the evenings and that sort of thing where other people who are married or have families might not have that flexibility. So I think from 1 Corinthians 7 where Paul says that, single people, they can just focus on the things of God and, married people, they have all these other troubles, but single people can, really just focus on doing what God wants them to do. I've really felt that, and I feel very blessed in ways to be single because I feel like I can then, have the flexibility to do things that maybe other people aren't able to do. It doesn't, I think we also need to have boundaries in saying no if people ask us to do things and they're offloading because we're single, they think we don't have anything else going on in our lives. I think it is important to have boundaries to say no, to make sure that we aren't just working or doing too many things, but we're also making sure we spend time with God and have rest time for ourselves and those sorts of things. So that's partly knowing yourself as well and to be able to say no if you need to. Yep.
Yeah, like I've had comments like from one that I remember is that I'm 10 years behind everyone else because I wasn't married and I didn't have certain family or, career standing. It didn't fit their picture of what success looked like. And probably what I'd encourage, it was hard to articulate it at the time, but probably what I would encourage is that to say that my worth and my purpose doesn't rest on my marital status. My worth is fully dependent on who Jesus says I am. He's made us sons and daughters of the living God, and so we always have that right standing every day, forever, for eternity. We always have that. We always have that standing as God's children. And my purpose to know God and to glorify Him is true whether I'm single or married. I'm not behind because I'm not married. God is taking me on His journey, preparing me for the things that He has prepared in advance for me to do. And how I know God, how I glorify Him and serve Him happens to be coming through a time of being single. Like I was saying before, it's a different training ground. So that's probably what I would encourage, is to show that our worth and our purpose and our direction is not dependent on us being married, but on the purpose and worth that Jesus gives us and bringing us to glorify Him in all the ways He's given us to do in the relational standing that we have.
I think as I was thinking about this and thinking about being single, I think seeking God's kingdom first was something that continually came up in my mind. That the Bible doesn't say seek marriage first or seek to have kids and a family first, but seek God's kingdom first. And so I think if we're doing that and we're seeking what God wants and expanding His kingdom and sharing the gospel and living for Him first and foremost in our lives, then I think we can't, I feel that for me anyway, looking back, and even though there have been times where it's been hard being single, knowing that I've been doing what God wants me to do and I feel that I've been obedient to Him, then I don't have a lot of regrets in being single because I feel like I've been following the path that God has had me on. So I think if we're, as His followers, if we are walking the path that He has for us, I'm not saying that there won't be times of struggle as a single person, but being able to look back and know that, like Craig said, it's not, I wasn't in a relationship for all that time. It's more, have I been obedient? Have I been living for God through my life? And if you can say yes, then I don't think we can have too many regrets, because we are seeking God's kingdom first, which is what He's told us to do.
Awesome. Thanks, Sandra. Is it okay to use online dating platforms? What should we be careful about if and when we do it? Yeah. I can start. Yeah. So I would say yes, it's okay. Yeah, I think it is a minefield out there. Yeah, so for me, I personally don't like using online platforms. That's just my personal preference. But I think, if that's something you want to use, that's fine. And I mean, yeah, so obviously you don't want to get catfish, you don't want to meet fake people. There's a lot of challenges, right? And I think even as people, we put up these walls for people to actually know who we truly are. And on online platforms, it's even more easier to not be real. And for those reasons, I think, and also because it's just the way I'm wired, I prefer meeting people in person. But yeah, I'll leave it at that for now. Craig?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's okay to use online dating. It's an intentional way of saying, I'm seeking a relationship, and others are saying the same thing. You're pursuing a relationship and it's open. One thing I'd probably say is if you're going to go on a date with someone, actually meet them in person, is probably let someone know that you're going to go and have this date. And yeah, don't give them any money if they ask for it.
I think, I think online now there was in the past a lot of stigma about going online, but I think now almost everyone you meet is online who's single. I think it's a great way to know that somebody is single and interested in being in a relationship. I think sometimes when you meet someone face to face and they're single, then you spend a lot of time trying to work out are they wanting to meet someone? Are they not? But when you meet online, then well, hopefully you're there because you're wanting to be in a relationship, or, hopefully people will say what they're there for. But yeah, I think that's easier in that way, that you're not trying to figure out whether that person is even interested in meeting someone. You already know because they're on the online dating app. So I think it's fine to go on if that's what you feel led to do. But I think there are a lot of things we do need to be careful about, especially as single females. We do have to be really careful about, like Elijah said, being catfished, or people are quite crazy, actually. If you listen to a podcast called Something Was Wrong, season 1, it's a bit quite interesting. People who go on, they love bombs, so they'll say all these things about how amazing you are, want to buy you gifts, blah, 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 all these things, but they're actually crazy. So what's really important is, like Craig said, to let someone know if you're going to go on a date. But even before that, I think letting people know that you are online, that you are, chatting with people online, who you're chatting to, just be really open and transparent with close friends so that you have some sort of accountability. I think that's really important, to have people in your life who can speak into that. In these crazy podcasts that I've been listening to, something that really stood out to me was these people were in these relationships with people they'd met online, and it wasn't going well, but the person in the relationship couldn't really see that for themselves. And it was really their family and their friends who spoke into that and just said, hang on a second, you're different, or this person doesn't quite seem right, or they were able to see something because they were a bit more objective. And so I think being with introducing, if you meet someone from online, introduce them to your friends or to people quite early on, so that you're not in this exclusive kind of thing where you're not getting any input from anyone else, because I think, especially if you've met online, you can be whoever you want to when you meet someone online. You could be, or they could be, you don't really know this person. It's very different to meeting someone at church who you've been able to observe, you've been able to see what they're like. You don't really do that or you can't really do that straight away when you meet someone online. So I think, they can tell you whatever they want to tell you about themselves, but trying to get input from other people or being quite open and not being exclusive or secretive about things, or I think that would be my biggest bit of advice, is to make sure you include other people in this process, because sometimes when we're in it for ourselves we can get too caught up, and that can be quite dangerous.
I'm a bit too old to understand this catfish thingy, so I don't understand what you're talking about. But just a couple of thoughts. I'm going to assume that this online dating is legitimate. It's true. I think if we go by the definition of dating, it's basically to get to know another person, right? And I'm not sure how well you can get to know another person. I mean, you hear horror stories about Zoom meetings where the person is all dressed up, but when he gets up from his chair, he's wearing a pair of shorts or something like that. So I'm not sure whether you can actually get to know a person very well. So I would say, you can go on online dating perhaps as a start, just to kick off, maybe even a filter system, because some people, you look at it and you talk to them, straight away it's a no, so don't waste time. But even for those who have passed your filtering, I think it's important to finally physically meet them. I think that's the best way to know people. If dating is about trying to find the right person. And of course, everything else about your friends being involved in the whole process, I think that's important. Thanks.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
From a dinosaur's point of view, I can't even get on to Zooming with the Grace girls, so there's no way that I can do online dating at my age.
Sorry, I'll just add something else as well about, what was already said, is to meet someone face-to-face quite soon after you have connected with them online. I've also listened to podcasts where people go years with chatting, and then they end up, somehow discovering that this person isn't who they said they are. I guess that's the same sort of catfish thing. But just try to meet up face-to-face as soon as you can. And doing a little bit of Facebook stalking, that's kind of helped for me in the past too, where I've been chatting with someone and then I'll look them up on Facebook and say we have mutual friends, and so I can ask a mutual friend, I've been talking to this person, what do you think of them, before maybe even meeting them face-to-face, just to do a bit of screening. I think that's good.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, just reflecting even in real time as I hear it. I think online dating really is a good way to start off a relationship. But then you meet them and it goes into having an actual in-person relationship, and all the wisdom that the other people have shared and Sandra has said about doing it in conjunction with your friends and family. It becomes, you go from online dating to actual dating. So I'd say it's a good way to kick things off, and then the wisdom of having relationship in the context of your friends becomes vital. So thanks, that was helpful.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Really, really insightful, and appreciate all your contributions today. I think that's actually all the questions we have time for today. So sorry if we didn't get to your questions. I'm not sure if maybe we might be able to, I won't comment on that for now. So just a few things to mention, a few announcements. So our next seminar is on sustainable caregiving. So this is about how we can care better for those people who are giving care on for family or friends, how we can support them in practical ways. And just a reminder that if you haven't filled out the filled out the feedback form using the QR code, you can do that now before you leave, just in case you forget about it. And also, I just wanted to, as a reminder, to let everyone know that this seminar is recorded, so you can find it on our website under the resources page. And yeah, lastly, I just wanted to close in prayer, if that's okay, just to wrap up for today. But before I do that, I'd like to just say thank you to our panelists. We have a small gift for you guys. Cool. So this is for you, Auntie Jenny. For you, Chung Hoi. And this is for you, Craig. And Sandra. Thank you so. Yeah. Thank you guys so much. Pleasure to have you. Round of applause. And this is for myself. So all right. Yeah. Thank you everyone for coming today. Pleasure to have you all. And yeah, if you do have any questions that you want to ask me, feel free to stay back. But yeah, that's all for today. Appreciate your time. Thanks, guys. Cool. So yeah, we'll just we'll just pray before we go. Father God, just want to thank you, Lord, for who you are, the way that you've created us, and the fact that you've given us this God-given desire to be known, to be loved, for relationships, for the gift of relationships, Father. And yeah, God, I pray that no matter what stage we are in the journey of relationships, whether we're single or married, Lord, that you would help us to keep the main thing. God, that we would help us to care for those single people around us. That if we're single, Lord, you would help us to stay obedient and also be grateful for where we're at, and help us to come to you in times of loneliness or challenges, God. So God, I pray that that ultimately you would help us to walk closer to you as we seek to build healthy relationships with those people around us. So we pray all of this in Jesus' name. Amen. Thanks, guys.